All right. Well, good morning and welcome, Jill, to the Intentional Leaders podcast.
Good morning, Cindy. Thanks so much for having me this morning.
I am excited about this discussion because you and I met about 5 or 6 years ago. We were I'm murky on the date when I was working at Madison College, and you have been at Madison College for almost 14 years as a
Yeah.
faculty member. And I remember first meeting you, and I think we had coffee in the main area. And all I could think of is, I love this woman. I love her. And then I found out you are teaching on helping people develop businesses and be entrepreneurs and that entrepreneurial mindset. And I just thought we're gonna we're gonna be friends.
Yeah, it didn't take us long to become friends, but then, with the pandemic, time is elusive too. So things happen,
Yeah.
and it was nice to be able to reconnect with you.
Yes, absolutely. And so part of our reconnection started because you were interested in veering into a consulting direction. And speaking of entrepreneurial, which is part of who you are, I just want to explain a little bit of your background, and I know you will too, but you are also the co-owner of Niche Publications, and you've been doing that for about 20 years,
Yeah.
which is highlighting women's accomplishment in business, correct?
Yeah, I started that with two other women in 2004, and it
Yeah.
was a women's publication that highlighted the incredible things that women were doing within our area. And so,
Yeah.
still doing that. It's taken on more of an online presence now, but certainly
Yeah.
has been a great experience. And it really is part of that connecting process of what led me into teaching in the small
Yes.
business entrepreneurship field. And
Yeah.
I have the privilege of teaching a small business entrepreneurship. So essentially, I'm teaching students how to own and operate a business.
Yeah.
More
Love that.
important than that, it's about teaching the entrepreneurial mindset and some of those
Yeah.
traits that can be so helpful in just life in general. And so
Yes.
yes, people can start a business. That's great. And if that's the outcome, wonderful. But if they choose not to start a business, how can this entrepreneurial mindset set them up effectively for success within an organization? And so that's
Yeah.
exciting to me. Things like resilience and
Mm,
adaptability and growth mindset and
yeah.
being proactive and problem solving are traits that can help anyone.
Yes, for sure. And I think what sometimes happens in organizations, especially as they get large and complicated, people lose that mindset because they get stuck in the bureaucracy of I can't do anything, I don't have any control. And I do believe that a lot of leaders, especially the squishy middle management kind of level, probably have more control than sometimes they feel like. And I think for the work that you're doing around that mindset, it gives people control and agency. Like, hey, you do have some control over this. And as you said, it's not just for people starting a business or wanting their own business, it's for people who feel stuck in businesses that don't feel like they have options, and they might.
Yeah, and right now there's this detachment that's going on with organizations
Yes,
and employers, and it doesn't
yes,
have to be that way. I think there's
yeah.
processes and things that we can implement to change that. And so that's something that's very exciting to me.
Yeah, for sure. It was interesting because on my MSN always comes up on my search bar in the morning, and one of the most searched things as of today is how to eliminate stress or manage stress. And so, as you're saying, like that detachment, and even post-COVID, there's been so much research that people are still feeling anxiety and more so than ever. So it wasn't just that period of time; it's continued on from there.
Yeah, and that's really like in terms of employee engagement, numbers are at an all-time
Yeah,
low, which is frightening to me because I think too we have
absolutely.
tools in place that can really help control some of those things. And if it can make people be better people,
Yes.
why not implement, right?
Yes, absolutely. Like, let's just all be better human beings or happier or less stressed or feel
Right.
like we have more control over our lives, which is awesome. So
Yeah.
I want to dig into some of the questions that are on my mind and I think will be helpful to understand to our listeners. But you're wanting to complement the work that you do as a faculty in Madison College and also and your online presence with your publication to do more consulting in organizations directly. So, what inspired that transition going from academia to what your new organization, which is called Sync, which I love? And I know that you're very interested in culture and engagement and emotional intelligence. So, what kind of prompted that journey for you?
Yeah, I've always been in a position where I love to figure things out, like processes
Yeah,
and systems as it relates to businesses, but
yeah,
more importantly, as it relates to people. And how can we make things better? And how can we identify maybe a problem and a gap
yeah,
within industry and what we can do to make that better?
yeah,
And, with my faculty experience with entrepreneurial mindset, what's interesting is if you research what makes someone successful,
yeah,
most of those items that make people successful are within that entrepreneurial mindset. It's really
yeah,
about knowing oneself, what motivates
yes,
oneself, how can you communicate effectively. And as humans, these traits
yeah,
are not things that we're born with. It's
yes,
processes that we can benefit from as we implement and as we take control of these and practice these. And so I think it's innately in every one of us. We just need
yeah,
people to bring that out of us. And so if
yeah,
we can take things like as simple, and I say simple because it's very complicated, as emotional intelligence,
yes,
self-awareness, self-regulation, knowing what motivates us, behaviors, what triggers us, and social skills and the like, and
yeah,
implement that into a setting, it's going to make us be better human beings. And that to
yeah,
me can make a difference in the world. And so I
yeah,
think that's what's exciting to me. There's three things that I really think are important to me in terms of my work, and it's connection, in
yep,
terms of connecting with people, problem solving and coming up with good solutions, and
yeah,
then purpose and results. And I think
yeah,
that I can bring that into the workplace and maybe
yeah,
try to figure out why is engagement at an all-time low? What can we do
yeah,
to make a workplace culture better and make
yes.
people's lives better?
Yeah, yeah. And I think you've hit on some really important things that keep coming up in the research that are disconnects with leaders and organizations. And one is about that purpose. When leaders feel purpose driven, and I'm reading a book right now that's been on my list for a long time called Extreme Ownership. Are you familiar with that by any
I'm
chance?
not. No, I'm writing it down though, because I'm going to
Yeah,
be reading it.
yeah, it's real. I'm halfway through it. I like I got halfway through it in one night because I was like, oh, but and because I do a lot of work on accountability, and this is written by two Navy SEALs and how they think about accountability. But it's um, my long-winded my long-winded statement here is that it's all about purpose. If you
Mhm.
know the purpose of what you are doing and what you said too about connection. I mean, Navy SEALs are known for their connection to
Sure.
each other and also problem solving, which they have to do on the regular. I think you're hitting on some issues and bringing them together in a way that is a differentiator. And I think it does and it will help organizations and cultures to focus on those things very specifically. So I love that that's your interest and that's your purpose is to be able to do that more. So.
Absolutely. I just find that like exciting, and I know it's such a difference maker. And I think of
Yeah.
how our world would look, not just from business perspective. That's important for sure from
Yeah.
business perspective as well, but just from a life perspective. If we can
Yeah,
implement some of these small changes, I think small changes over time equal big results.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's the challenge we have though as educators and coaches and consultants is to try to help create that awareness of the gap. And you and I have talked a lot about that. When you have knowledge and insight and research that is about what are the best practices, how do you get awareness in organizations? And when you think about your education background and your academic background, how do you think that'll help your approach to working with organizations and leaders?
Yeah, I think a lot of, if I would boil it down to one thing, I would say this entrepreneurial mindset is a difference
Yeah.
maker. And
Yeah.
teaching that to students, for example, just pointing out basic things of being creative and being proactive and growth mindset,
Yes.
what that can do to one's life. Again, this is something that people aren't born with. It's something that's
Yeah.
developed over time. It can be such a game changer. And I know that can
Yeah.
happen in an organizational level too. And it happens,
Yeah.
if leadership embraces things like that and it can be passed down into team environments, the culture is going to thrive. It's going to
Yeah.
be different. And I just took an AI training recently, and it's
Oh,
so interesting to me that the top skills were listed out for 2025 and moving forward for employers, what they're looking for in employees. Number
yeah.
one, of course, is emotional intelligence. And I
Oh,
think
is
that's
it?
because it's lacking within, we say,
Yeah.
oh, emotional intelligence. What does that really mean? How can we
Right.
implement? What are some tools that we can integrate to be effective? So it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to do. But emotional intelligence was the top competency. Second was critical
What?
skills and problem solving. And
Oh,
third was being creative and innovative. And
oh
so
my
I feel
gosh.
like that's exciting
Yes.
because these are things that can be implemented with proper
Yes.
tools and training.
Absolutely. And I think that's what's really awesome about the consulting that you're starting to do is you're focusing on, wasn't it fun to see that? Like, oh, AI said it, but I kind of knew that too.
Sure, right.
Because you've seen it in students for decades. I mean, and I totally agree that some of these skills are simple in a way, not to execute, but simple in concept. And I think there's a big disconnect, and tell me if you agree, that people believe they're better at some of those things than they actually are.
I would agree with.
And
I think we all want to believe we're really good at all of these simple things of
yeah,
emotional intelligence, problem solving, creative thinking. But the reality is it's an ongoing, continuous improvement
yeah, yeah,
procedure. And it just is something that we're never going to be perfect at. It's
yeah,
ongoing. And I think that's
yeah,
okay to admit that. I mean,
yes,
we need to be lifelong learners. We need to
yeah,
be proactive with this. And these are tools that we can implement into lives and
yeah.
continuously improve upon all the time. And I think it's okay
Yeah.
to admit that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the vulnerability in leaders is getting to recognize that there's no shame in admitting gaps
Right.
around
And
those
we're
things.
going to
Like,
make mistakes, right? Even the
yeah,
best
oh, for
trained
sure.
person in these methods are likely going to make mistakes because we're humans with emotions, and sometimes
Yes.
we can do things that we wish we would have done differently, and that's okay
Yes.
too. It's
Yeah,
a matter of getting back up and moving forward and making that
absolutely.
positive change.
Absolutely. It's funny, I was doing a series of um, being thinking ahead to social media posts, and my marketing person gave me a few prompts to think about. And it was about, emotional intelligence, agility, mistakes. And I went down memory lane and it was kind of mortifying, like, oh my God. And I told her, like, the one thing, if I could have done differently or better, one thing that I could pick, it would have been understanding emotional intelligence earlier in my life. But at that time, there wasn't a lot. I mean, that was a few decades ago. There wasn't as much research. All the things that you know now, back then, it wasn't as pervasive. People didn't understand it. And I kind of felt a little sad doing some of those posts like, oh, screwed up there. Oh, didn't do that great. Sucked
And
at
we all
that.
have, right? And you're right, there wasn't as much emphasis on emotional intelligence, but what a
Yeah.
differentiator in
Yes.
terms of if we want competitive advantage in terms of employee
Yes.
or workplace culture, this is
Yes.
it. I mean, it can
Yeah.
make such a difference.
Absolutely. Well, and if you're finding it coming up on AI, and I'm seeing it on the flip side of stress and people
Mm.
stress, that is all about emotional regulation and well-being and all of those things that
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know that
Knowing,
people know how
what
to do.
triggers you, what motivates you, when
Yes.
to take a
Yes.
15-minute walk just to
Right.
recalibrate. Certain things
Yes.
like that are just easy exercises that can help us with these things.
Yeah. So your goal is to bring tools, resources, education, and even some kind of analysis of the current state of culture, correct? That's kind of your vision. So how you want to provide support to organizations and leaders. And
Yeah,
is that
yeah, to take a current snapshot of what's going on within the organization and then
yeah,
implementing ways to perhaps improve the culture
yep,
and improve engagement and give some of these tools and
yeah,
trainings and skill set to people to make them
yeah.
better people too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And what I really am excited about for you as you're on this journey, and I know you're shaping this as we speak, and you've been shaping it now. What I love is you've been teaching all of these things for a long time, but now you get to move from I'm teaching students individually to this to be moving into organizations where you can have a bigger effect on the culture. And I know that's your goal is more cultural development, correct?
Yeah, it is. And I
Yeah.
think that provides me that purpose that I really long for to
Yeah.
see change. And change
Yes,
management is kind of a hot topic right now, too, with the
for sure.
ongoing onset of AI. And I
Yeah.
feel like if I can help create positive change within an organizational culture, that would give me a lot of fulfillment.
Yeah.
But I know also for that organization, it would mean more productivity and less
Yes.
absenteeism and
Yeah.
all that sort of stuff that goes along with that, too.
Yeah. And I think that's the fun part is when you can find a purpose. And I feel the same way. Like I find a purpose in, helping people learn and grow and shift and know they can. And you see the difference and the impact it can make, and you know the difference and impact it's going to make. And I think that's a beautiful thing because it's energizing to us. And to see the results is also really inspiring. So I love that for
Absolutely.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you think about gaps and organizational gaps that you've seen. And you have seen these through not just your work with, with companies, but also with your students. I think that's the cool part of your experience is you've seen this in a different way through teaching students what are the disconnects. So, what do you think are some of those biggest gaps around emotional intelligence and culture that you've heard over your your decades of teaching and
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think some of the gaps are, and this might be a simplistic version of defining this, but I feel like words matter, but words are only
yes,
words. We have to take action. And so we can talk about emotional intelligence. We can talk about some of the gaps that are, I mean, people are stressed out. They're angry. They're
yeah,
worried. Engagement is low. Stats show that. What can we
yes,
do differently? We have to connect. We have to create a culture of connectedness where people feel that they're cared for.
yes,
It's easy to say these things. It's so difficult to do. This notion of empathy, I think, is so vital
yeah,
at making sure people know that they feel valued and that they're in a safe environment and that people care for them. And it's those little things that add up to these big results over time, but it's difficult to do. So I think words are important, yes, but that action is even more important of making sure
yeah,
that the organization, for instance, if it says that they are about well-being, that they have well-being type of practices and trainings for their employees
yeah,
so that they feel that connectedness. And experience matters also.
yeah,
Creating that culture of human connection and experience is going to matter to the employee as well. So just making sure that it's more than just words, that
right,
there's action behind those words.
yeah,
And things like well-being and mental health matters,
yeah.
and that there's procedures in place for that.
Yeah, and I think that's the cool part of what you're doing too is there are a lot of people that want to educate on and create awareness of gaps. And what I love about what you're doing is you want to go beyond creating the awareness of the gaps to implement processes and practices to close the gaps. And I know you and I have talked about, assessments and surveys to highlight that, so people, leaders, and culture can measure that. And I think that's an important part too of what you want to do because it's easier to say, oh yeah, we focus on that and we value employees. And then you dig into, okay, what practices do you have in place to do that and to help people feel safe and heard and connected? It's like, well, none.
Right, right. Yeah, making sure that feedback is something that's meaningful and timely.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I
Yes.
agree with that. It's making sure there's action behind those words and that there's systems in place for that.
Yeah. And when you think about, because you mentioned earlier that you really like processes and practices and systems. So how will that inform your consulting practice? What do you want to have in place so that you feel like you can contribute to creating those systems and practices? Because that's actually what you do now with students, right? Is you're helping them get into the mindset, but then create their business. So you're doing the same in what you want to do consulting wise. So how are you thinking about that right now?
Yeah, I think it's creating those measurable, tangible efforts to
Yes.
show, okay, this is what we're doing to improve these processes. Because it's
Yeah.
one thing, it is one thing to talk about, we want to change XYZ, but it's another thing to implement. And it's
Yeah.
another thing to show action and another thing to show we've improved engagement by this percentage because of these
Yeah.
things that we've implemented. And so I think that's the part that I can bring to the table in terms of we're not just going to talk about this, we're going to put measures
Yeah.
in place to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a real um, differentiator is really making sure that upfront the processes, the practice, the discipline, the structure are in place. Because a lot of these things that you are um, addressing around culture and emotional intelligence, and they're so squishy.
Yeah.
Like how do we measure empathy? And that I read a book, and this was right after COVID. Was we were cured or after that time period, and there was a book written by a couple women. I can't remember anyway, it was called The Empathy Advantage.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
at the time that I read that, and I thought, oh boy, a lot of people, again, a lot of managers I think aren't necessarily dialed into what does that mean? Because I think for a lot of people, empathy is scary. It's
Mhm.
scary because if I ask you, Jill, about your emotions, then I have to do something with it, right?
Right. And it's a vulnerability too that I think we all have to
Yes,
kind of let go of the facade a bit and get
yes,
into some, emotions can be vulnerable. So that's hard
yeah,
always to, have a conversation around, but it's important in terms of
yeah.
connectedness.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about systems, practices, structure to something as squishy as that, that's why I think like you are getting at a big disconnect for a lot of organizations and a lot of leaders. And it's probably going to be scary, but for them, right, to have that vulnerability, but
Right.
important because you have a lot of the data behind what you want to do. And you've seen it in your students,
For
right, in the
sure.
stories that you've heard.
Yeah, for sure. And the outcomes, if these businesses true, and I know the businesses want to be productive and they want,
Yeah.
return on investment and all those sorts of things. In order to do that effectively, this stuff matters. And so it's
Yeah.
just a matter of getting those systems in place where they can see the return on investment to what this is going to look like from a productivity standpoint once their employees feel more
Yes.
connected.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. And is there any particular market that you're interested in serving, or are you looking, because even your student and your educational presence has really run the gamut in terms of industries or markets. Is there any particular market or industry that you're looking at serving in your
Nothing like
business?
super specific in terms of, I mean, I feel like mid-sized businesses is probably my specialty of figuring out these
Yeah.
processes, but I like big business too. And I think there's merit to implementing these sorts of concepts at any size business, really,
Yeah,
because it
I agree.
matters. And I think we're in a culture now in 2025 of divisiveness. And
Yes.
can we control some of that? And how can we be more civil in the workplace environment in terms of
Yeah.
that connection and purposefulness and that sort of thing? And so I do feel like this is meaningful for all business levels.
Yeah.
Um, but if we want teams to perform well, this is super crucial to implement.
Yeah. Absolutely. And a lot of the Google research on team development, team performance, they highlight so many of the things that you've talked about with empathy and psychological safety and connection and all those kinds of things. So there's so much that supports the focus that you are, what you're focusing on and how you want to focus on it. So
Yeah.
when you think about teaching, and for many years, and this is just more a curiosity question, what has been the most fun part of teaching for you, and what has been the most challenging part of teaching
Hmm,
for you?
that's a great question. The most fun part of teaching for me is when I'm going to just take finances, for example. That's,
Yeah.
I would equate that almost to emotions where it's kind of squishy and
Mm,
scary
yeah.
and people kind of shy away from that and they don't like to talk about that. But
Yes.
once we can simplify certain aspects of that and the light bulb goes off within
Yes.
a student's mind or a person's mind, and they're like, wow,
Yes.
I understand that now. And I understand the significance of why that's important. That
Yeah.
provides me a lot of purpose. And so
Yeah.
if I can simplify something and provide meaning behind that, that
Yeah.
is of value to me.
Yeah.
Um, some of the challenges that I've maybe experienced, I've had my fair share. It's being able to simplify certain things to get down to that simplicity of
Yeah.
this is why it matters. This is why you need to do that. And I've had students who say, you say this, but I can't do this because for whatever reason, they might come from a negative source of structure
Yes.
or whatever. And
Yes.
it's like you can change.
Yes.
Making sure that they have the confidence to change and this I talked about as humans, we have these successful traits. We have this entrepreneurial mindset. We can all learn emotional intelligence. We have that
Yeah.
innately within us. It's just getting
Yeah.
to into that and
Yes.
bring that out of people. So that's probably the most
Yeah.
challenging part.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting because when you think about what's energizing and exciting for you is the same as what's challenging. When you're able to break down something and see it and see the path to get there, and you see it in someone's eyes, like I get it, and then you see other people who get stuck somewhere in that process or journey of having a limiting belief about themselves or their ability to cut through some of that, like, no, I can't. And of course they can. And I've seen that too. It's like
Sure.
people that think, and I had someone in a class recently, and they're like, "Well, I'll take some of this, but I'm retiring anyway." And I said, "Well, when?" She's like, "Well, in 4 years." And I was like, 4 years? That's a long time to stay stuck or to believe that you can't do something different
Right.
in 4 flipping years.
Yeah,
But
we
that's
have so many
frustrating.
self-limiting beliefs that we just put on
Yes.
ourselves, and it's like it does not have to be that way. We have the ability to push through some of that and to overcome some
Yeah.
of those barriers. It's just getting people to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a gift that you have, obviously, because of your success in teaching people that and helping them move forward and helping businesses do the same. By definition of what you've already been doing, you've already shifted organizational and cultural development because you're creating space for leaders to shine within whatever they do. And as you said, the entrepreneurial spirit isn't just for people who are starting a business.
It's for everyone,
So,
really. I mean,
yeah.
it really correlates well to successful people, which we all want. We all want that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if people can have that, again, like I said, you said, you want to work with all different size businesses. And I think the ability as companies get mid-size and larger to still possess that spirit of change and creativity and innovation, which, frankly, I think in today's world, a little bit of that creativity and innovation is kind of squashed out of us.
It
Because of
can
you
be.
said there's so much pressure for results and
Mhm.
making a difference and impact and performance and all those things,
And
which
not
really
wanting
puts,
to fail. Our culture
yes,
teaches us we
yes,
shouldn't fail, and really we can learn so much through that. And that we want to take calculated risks for sure, but being able
yeah,
to be allowed to be creative and curious in a work setting, and
yes.
if it amounts to a failure, to learn from that right away and alter.
Yeah, for sure. I've been integrating this. So when I talk in train and learn in leadership classes about um, open and closed-mindedness, which is what you're kind of getting at too. How vulnerable will you be? How open will you be? And I give this little curiosity quiz, and it's only like 10 questions, but most people grapple with a fair amount of them. Like, how curious are you? How interesting even do you think people are? How much do you think you have to know the answer before you get into a conversation? All those kinds of questions, and a
Sure.
lot of people struggle with that. And I think, again, we learn that in school, right? We're curious until we get into first grade, and then we're not supposed to be curious anymore. We're supposed to be right.
Right, right, right. There's that part, I think as life progresses too, we experience different types of failures or different types of
Yes.
situations that are hard, and that squelches the curiosity and creativity of
Yes.
our minds. Also, we have to be like children to some extent
Yeah.
of being willing to put ourselves out there, and if we make a
Yeah.
mistake, it's okay.
Yeah, yeah, fall down, get up. It's not like I'm gonna stop walking. And and as I strolled down memory lane over the weekend of all my mistakes, I was like, well, it really shaped me into who I am today. So going back on that was a little bit painful, but also a little bit freeing because you see, right, the effect of those things. And
Sure.
talking about them brings it to the surface. And I think that's what you help leaders do is bring it to the surface. Like, let's all talk about it because it's all there. Let's talk about our empathy. Let's talk about our vulnerability. Let's talk about the connection we have with people at work or don't have. And that's what I think is so, so important about what you're doing is you're bringing up those conversations.
Oh yeah, it's exciting. I get very excited thinking about it and thinking about the
Yeah.
possibilities of what change it can bring.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about, and I love to ask people this because, of course, I name my company Intentional Leaders, and I know you believe in self-awareness and closing that gap. And um, I think that is one of the most essential things that I've come to realize over the years in working with leaders is that gap in self-awareness. Most people think they are more self-aware than they are. So what are ways that you try to foster intentionality in what you do?
Cindy, I try to be as authentic to myself as possible. And that starts with knowing who I am, that
Yeah.
self-awareness piece. Now, again, that's a continuous process. It's not something that I have down 100%. It's
Yeah.
ongoing, but it's knowing what motivates me, what's important to me, where my morals and values lie, and then being authentic to that. So when I say certain things, it equates, it aligns into my actions. I think words and actions need to align. If you're,
Yeah.
to be an intentional leader, if
Yes.
there's a misalignment, that means trouble. And so I think being
Yeah.
authentic is super important and
Yeah.
making sure that words and action align. Knowing that I need to be a lifelong learner and that
Mm, yeah.
knowledge needs to keep being pursued. I think that's super important. Knowing that this life we lead and this whole self-regulation and self-awareness, it's a process. It is ongoing
Yeah.
and it takes pursued knowledge continually.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to recognize and realize, and that we're going to make mistakes. I'm going to make a mistake. It's a matter of getting up, moving on, and learning
Yeah.
from that mistake.
Yeah. And I think that's why when I originally met you, for me, again, that authenticity, I'm drawn to people who they are. Like, here's Jill. And I was like, she's awesome. Because, part of it is that authenticity came through right away for me. And the more that I have come to know you, the more that I know your pursuit of growth, learning is important for you. And I think in our business, we have to be a great role model for that. And even when we first met, you were doing all kinds of additional education and pursuit of knowledge. And then last year, you went through a certification process,
I
right?
did,
So in
yeah.
that certification, because again, you're teaching people this stuff. And what I loved about it is like, well, I'm going to go get certified in this, in this business and coaching and consulting. So what was the biggest learning insight for you in exploring that, knowing that you're also a teacher of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to just back up just a second. And I think it was 2018 or 19, I went through a certification for these motivators, behaviors, emotional intelligence to be certified in those areas. That was so enlightening to me because,
Yeah.
and I remember it was enlightening because you're getting to know people's motivations and why they act certain
Yes.
ways. And this whole notion of emotional intelligence was so intriguing. And I remember the presenter saying, you're never going to be able to walk into an airport and look at people the same way because you're going to try to
Mm,
figure them out. And it's like, it's
yes.
true. And I like to try to figure people out, but even more so after learning some of the assessments and tools that I was taught during
Yeah.
that time. And then this past summer, I went through another program, and that was so interesting too, just to figure out the processes of how, like, models of successful systems. And that to me was so
Yes.
beneficial.
Yes. I love that. Well, and it keeps building. You keep packing things into your toolbox, and I think again that's why we love connecting is because we both are so invested in that. You know, what is the science and the art and science of people and cultures and organizations and leaders, and we're both pursuing, similar fronts, maybe in slightly different ways. And your background is so critical to your insight and to your knowledge about gaps and how those gaps can be closed. So, and I don't think we talked about your company name. Your company name is Sync.
Yes,
Your new
sync.
company. So where did that come from?
Well, to me, sync represented collaboration and connection and some of those keywords that I think I thrive for. And it's
Yeah.
about not just, surviving. It is about what can we do to really thrive? And so sync to me
Yeah.
represented more than just a connect or
Yes.
um, problem solving. It was about, oh, how can we come together and really synergize for a really positive result?
Yeah. Oh, I think it's a great name, and you're helping again align things, close the gaps as you said earlier, create alignment about some really sticky issues and soft issues that have a huge impact. So I'm so excited to see where this journey is going to take you, Jill.
Oh, thanks so much,
I
Cindy. I
really,
just love your
yeah,
energy and appreciate
I
all your insight.
I do too. And I think we talked about partnering together and working with some assessment tools and doing some things together. And I know our paths will stay integrated, aligned, and in sync, Jill,
Thank
won't
you.
they?
Wonderful.
So, how do you want people to reach out to you? So, I know I will put your LinkedIn profile in the podcast notes, but how do you want people to connect with you through LinkedIn if they're interested in your services? And I know you're creating the assessment tools to drive what you're looking to do in your business, and you've already started working on all of that, bringing that to life. But what would be the best way to
Yeah,
contact
right.
you?
Currently, LinkedIn would be the best way to connect at this point, and my
Okay.
website is being developed as we speak, so that will
Yes.
be a work in progress here too. But more information to come. But LinkedIn is likely the best alternative right now.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. It's hard when you're like the cobbler's shoes, aren't you? You're the cobbler teaching everybody how to make shoes, or you're I don't
Right,
know if
right.
that really is working for me, but you're so
It's
busy
true.
teaching people
Now
how
I
to
have to
do.
implement, right? I have to implement my
Yes.
strategies
And
here.
now you're like, oh, in all my free time after I'm doing this publication and I'm teaching and I'm consulting, and then I have to create a website too.
Right. Yes. It's
Remember
coming.
those days.
Work in progress. That's what I like to tell people. Everything is a work in progress.
It is, absolutely. And, a website gives a platform, but your presence is already a platform and a foundation for everything you're doing. So
Oh, thanks,
I
Cindy.
appreciate you taking the time today. I know we're going to work together. We're going to be doing some classes actually together, uh,
Yes.
coming up soon,
Yes.
like tomorrow-ish.
Tomorrow. Yes.
Tomorrow-ish, you're going to be attending one of my classes, and we're going
Yes. I'm
to
looking
try
forward to
to.
that.
Yes, absolutely. And just try to align our models and our thinking. And I am so excited for that. The ability to collaborate with you. I know I'm going to learn a lot from you, and I'm so
Oh, same. I feel the very same way, Cindy. Thank you so much.
yeah. Well, thank you for taking the time again this morning. And again, I'll put all your contact information in the show notes for people to get in touch with you. So thank you for being you and for being such a bright light
Oh, thank you,
in
Cindy.
the
Thank you
universe,
for
but
being
in
a
my
bright
life.
light. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for listening to the Intentional Leaders podcast. Our goal is to create more intentional, successful, and impactful leaders. So if you found this podcast helpful, please like, review, subscribe, and share, and create a universe of more intentional leaders.